All right, Lance, let's talk a little bit about this deadline. I think the biggest thing that most people are wondering is just why no starting pitching? And then you look at the starting pitching, and I want to encourage everyone right now, go check out the video that Lance did on his channel. We're going to link it down below, both in the comments and in the description. But you talked a lot about how starting pitching was definitely overspent. You have Jed Hoyer plus Dana Brown plus a few other GMs and baseball ops guys saying like, hey, the prices were just too high. So just overall, being in the business and hearing things, just overall thoughts on the Cubs not getting an impact starter. Sure, they got Soroka, but an impact guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really tough spot because it's obviously the point at which they needed, and yet the prices were probably exorbitant. And I think you could back into the prices being exorbitant through a few other trades that happened. Shane Bieber getting flipped to the Blue Jays for Call Steven, who's basically a number 4 starter in the bigs. He's a pretty high floor pitcher. That's a pretty hefty price for a guy with a player option at $60 million next year. I don't even know if he's going to exercise that. And then you go to some of the reliever trades too. A lot of guys were given up for relievers. Like Mick Abel
Yeah.
was given up for Juan Duran. Like that is a hefty price to pay. So I can't even imagine what some of the asks were for guys like Joe Ryan and Mackenzie Gore. Now, it's a tough spot of like, do you mortgage the future of the team to get a pitcher right now that is controllable, most likely for the next couple of years? That is the central question that all these GMs are asking themselves. And we currently have a gap in the market between how teams perceive the value of their controllable starting pitching versus how other teams trying to acquire that pitching think that value should break down. That's why none of these trades happened. And I don't think you could place that directly on Jed as being his problem. It's everyone in the industry's problem.
Yeah. So I would say there's like 2 or 3 trades that happen that you look at it as Cubs fans, you say, why not the Cubs? Eugenio Suarez, Adrian Hauser, and Merrill Kelly. The whole reason that we're doing this chat right now is because I actually texted you that after watching that video and that you made. And I said, what would that have looked like for the Cubs if you were to replace the type of prospects in those trades that were given up for those players? What would that look like for the Cubs? And I just want our audience to hear from you. Who would those guys be? Especially, like, let's just take the Suarez deal and one of the pitchers.
Yeah, we'll start with the Kelly one because this one, again, I don't think the Cubs had the capital to get this done. They got back
Interesting.
3 starting pitchers basically that are all projected as starting pitchers. It's a lot of depth to give up. I imagine they were probably going to try to qualifying offer Kelly. So you have to get over that hump of the D-backs. You have to basically woo them into thinking that this is worth it for them. Cole Drake, David Hageman, like they're upsidey pitchers. Cole Drake could be in the bigs right now, and I think he'd have a league average ERA. Hageman is like your upside guy. The equivalent on the Cubs side, I don't actually think it exists. The problem with the Cubs, I think, as a whole, that limited their ability to make transactions around starting pitching at this deadline is that a lot of teams seek starting pitching in return for things, especially on the lower levels of like, we'll center it around this position prospect, but give us a couple high fly or flyer starting pitchers. Think of the Helsley trade, right? Like they get that Baez kid who's a third baseman, and they throw in Nate Dome and Frank Illisalt, the Mets do, who are kind of these peripheral starter pieces. The Cubs do not have a lot of those starter pieces. What they ended up doing was trading those starting pieces they have for Taylor Rogers to the Pirates. That was Sam Armstrong and Ryan Gallagher. Those are the 2 guys on the Cubs that I think maybe were brought into a discussion around Kelly. I can't report that. I can't imagine the D-backs were looking at really anybody else in the system apart from like a Jackson
Okay.
Wiggins. Birdsell maybe, but he's coming off injury, so I don't entirely know whether he was like an attractive piece to some of these teams. So I honestly can't give you 3 names that could have matched what the Rangers gave. I think my offer would have been like Ryan Gallagher, Sam Armstrong, who again went for Taylor Rogers, and then maybe Brandon Birdsell. And again, I don't think the D-backs accept that because the Rangers package was better.
Interesting. What about Suarez?
Yeah, the Suarez one I think you could have gotten to because the second that trade happened, that was a midnight Wednesday night trade. And I remember it was up really late, and I was like, "This is it." Like I was like, "Huh, I'm kind of surprised here."
Wow.
And I wonder if it's because the players in the market contracted. So I know the Reds were linked via Jeff Passan's piece, and the Yankees were linked via Jeff Passan's piece as teams that could potentially fit for Suarez. Both those teams go out and fill their third base hole. The D-backs go into the deadline going, "I don't really know where to trade him." Like I don't know. I can't report again whether the Cubs were in. I imagine maybe they floated some ideas around it, but Matt Shaw's been playing really well, and they clearly liked Willie Castro a lot from a versatility standpoint, and again, a left-handed bat standpoint. He's a switch hitter, but I think he's going to obviously bat more from the left side. So the package with the Cubs to get Suarez maybe would have been something like Jonathan Long, and then again, I'll throw in Ryan Gallagher and Sam Armstrong as the pieces. And the only thing is that I imagine the D-backs would have liked Locklear over Jonathan Long because Jonathan Long is a right first baseman, Locklier's a lefty. So Again, I don't have an equivalent there, but I think the Cubs could have gotten close. It's just I don't necessarily know if they wanted to stack what's becoming more of like an average, not a strength for the Cubs at third base with Shaw. Like, do you want to stack a strength on top of a piece that isn't really too much of an issue, or go to the Twins and give up kind of less? And they ended up doing that, obviously, for Willie Castro.
A lot of fans were also kind of saying, like, hey, everyone wants Casey, everyone wants Ballesteros, everyone wants Wiggins. Why not instead these guys? Well, it got to the point where the rumors kind of sounded to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that the market doesn't really value the other guys, at least not the way that us Cubs fans have learned to value the Calvin Alcantaras, the James Triantoses, insert really any of the top prospects that we've talked about in the last couple of years. Are you getting that same kind of feeling? Maybe even like Jefferson Rojas? Like I don't hear his name a whole lot either. Do you think the market just is not interested in those guys?
Yeah, great point. I do want to correct one thing I think I said. I think I said that Gallagher and Sam Armstrong went to the Pirates. They went to the Twins, excuse me. So I'm mixing those
Okay.
two names up, but the principle still applies, right? If you don't get a Willie Castro or Taylor Rogers, like you'd be able to flip them potentially for Merrill Kelly or Eugenio Suarez. Besides the point, though, to your question, it's a great point. I think the pieces that teams wanted were, in whatever order you want to put them, 1A or 1B, was Owen Casey, Jackson Wiggins. I think Jefferson Ross is a very attractive piece. But again, that's like a tough guy, I think, for them to move because he's probably, I'd say, maybe one of their highest upside non-AAA guys in the minor leagues. So internal value on those guys, I imagine, maybe didn't meet the external value. Apart from that, yes, I agree with you. Like, I think there could have been potentially some paths where you go Alcantara, Ballesteros, Triantos, any package around that, and maybe you put Rojas in there as well, and you could have gotten a starting pitcher. But again, I think the problem, and I think we saw this a lot at this deadline in particular, a lot of teams wanted depth pitching, which the Cubs don't have. And I think it could have just been a scenario where the teams the Cubs were conversing with just didn't really have a need for a guy like Owen Casey. Think of the Twins, for example. If you're mad that the Cubs didn't go after Joe Ryan because you don't think the Cubs wanted to trade Owen Casey for Joe Ryan, that's incorrect. Matt Wallner is Owen Casey. That has been my comp on Owen Casey for a very long time. I don't understand why, as the Cubs, you would try to convince the Twins they need another Matt Wallner, So that's, again, your blocker. Like, if you're thinking you want to give up Owen Casey for Joe Ryan, the Twins are like, we just don't really value that piece. I think with position playing prospects, especially those who are going to require 40-man spots soon or already do for the most part, those guys are hard to trade. Like, they're difficult to get off your team because the other team goes, now we need to clear a 40-man spot if they don't have a 40-man spot. And also, does it contextually make sense with the prospects we have at AAA or in the major leagues? It just creates, it's harder. I think on the pitching side, you just go and get pitching. Like, you can never have enough pitching. We hear this all the time. So there's no blocker there. If you have a good pitching prospect, you can go and get whatever you want. This was my point the entire time with the deadline around Jackson Wiggins. If they wanted to put Jackson Wiggins on the table for a variety of pitchers, whether it be Edward Cabrera, Joe Ryan, Mackenzie Gore, I think they could have made more progress in those deals. As to whether they did, I'm not entirely sure. But the fact those deals didn't get done make me think the Cubs were less willing to give up a Jackson Wiggins. And again, to my point, I just think the fit with those 40-man style AAA position players needs to be perfect in order for a team to take those guys. And I don't think the Cubs found that perfect match at this deadline.
My counter to that,
yeah,
and maybe Joe Ryan isn't the guy, but Mackenzie Gore, Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, why not give up a Jackson Wiggins type for that plus an Owen Casey or someone else that is attractive to one of those teams? No, and I know all the prospect lovers out there, and that's okay, are going to say, well, that's the future. Yeah, but Jackson Wiggins could have Tommy John in the next 6 months. Owen Casey could trip on a sprinkler in the outfield and bust his ankle and he's out, right? Like there's just so many things that could happen. Whereas like right now, this team looks like they should be primed to go all in. You saw Ben Verlander probably say that the biggest losers in the trade deadline this year were the Cubs. And he said, because the roster is just so set to win right now. So I guess I'll round it out with this question. For those people that do say that, for those people that are mad at Jed right now, because there's a lot if you look on X, what do you say to that, especially looking at the comp of Jackson Wiggins for a guy that's already established, ready to go?
Great point. I mean, I think that I personally, am not speaking for the front office or anything, would have been comfortable giving up Jackson Wiggins for a variety of the controllable starting pitchers alongside Owen Casey and probably alongside a Rojas. Just think there's so much variance in those guys. It's a great point. I think at the end of the day, and you're going to hate this answer, the Cubs are very model driven. And I think a lot of the time, the teams that end up making these deadline deals that look like slight overpays are the teams that perhaps use a little more feel in these situations. I'm talking specifically about the Phillies with Dombrowski, and I'll say the Padres with AJ Preller. Obviously, model driven teams, right? But also ones where, we were talking, I think Council said in a scrum the other day, someone asked him something about analytics, and he was like, listen, all decisions are gut decisions. What you do is you intake the information, you intake the analytics, and you process them as you see fit, and then you make the decision. That's why it's a gut decision. The gut is informed by the analytics. I thought that was a very astute answer because I think that's how the Cubs on the field operate a lot. Like, you give Counsell the autonomy, and I think they like him and they paid him what they paid him because he's a guy that understands everything on the analytics side. He could probably sit down with an R&D person and understand what that guy's trying to model out. I don't think there's a lot of managers that can do that. Otherwise, though, like we see this in the draft with the Cubs and otherwise, they're a very model driven team. And it's hard, I think, if you want to be hell bent on the model, to look apart from that and go, okay, we acknowledge this is an overpay by our standards based on how we value a Jackson Wiggins or an Owen Casey or a Jefferson Rojas. But with that information, we believe right now it gives us a better chance to win. My last point will be, I think one of the hard things to reconcile in this industry is the concept that teams are trying to give themselves the best chance to win the World Series in multiple seasons. Whereas I think a lot of the fans look at it from the perspective of trying to win the World Series right now. And that is the difference that occurs, I think, in front offices. Like, Jed's job is to win the World Series, but I'd say it's almost more of Jed's job to be competitive to win the World Series over the next 4 years. Even if Ben Verlander's correct, and this is the team, this is the window, right? You don't know if you're re-signing Tucker to go all in right here. I'm not entirely sure if that's how they view it in the front office. I just imagine they're looking at more of a long-term picture. It's hard to operate in that short-term area, especially if you truly believe Jackson Wiggins is like upside of a number 3 or number 2 in a rotation, which I'm fascinated to see how he looks down the stretch here, right? No more workload stuff. That's past. Like, you can throttle him a little bit, get him up to 100 innings. He's got about a month and a half to do so. You can even bump him to AAA if you want. The stuff is good enough. Like, go make it look like it's a good thing you did not give up Jackson Wiggins. He absolutely has the potential to jump into the top 30 prospects in baseball and end up number 1 on the list for the Cubs when you jump into the offseason if he gives you a fantastic down the stretch run. And that would look great for Jet Hoyer, because then you could go into the offseason and be like, that's why I didn't trade Jackson Wiggins, because look at him now. He's more valuable than he was 2 months ago when you were asking why he didn't pitch for the entire month of June and July, or July.
That is why we are not in the front office, because when we don't trade for Kyle Tucker and we hold on to Cam Smith, we're mad. And then we trade Cam Smith for Kyle Tucker, we're still mad. So
it's a great point,
yeah. All I will say is I will always want to win the World Series this year. So that's you can't change that to me. Sorry, Lance.
I get you. I understand both sides.
All right. Well, you got to go do a hit with MLB. Guys, go check out the video that Lance said. Again, it's in the description and the comments below. Lance, thanks so much for always being a friend of the show and helping us out.
See you guys. Take care. Thanks for having me, Kyle.